Welcome to episode 3 on our countdown to the launch of fxhash version 2, and this episode is going to be all about the fxhash features object, and it's also going to be a short and slightly rambly episode because I have a cold, I've had very little sleep, and I'm back to using these prompt cards because I don't know what's going on. There is going to be a lot of editing in this episode, but let's start with the news first. That sound still isn't right. I really need to find a good one of those news things. Anyway, the big news this week is that the release calendar is filling up, and it's got a new filter on here which is show partners instead of show all, and that filters it down to, well, just partners, of which there's 2 at the moment. Casey is who's got his drop coming in, and then there's another one with ArtXCode for snail trails. Everyone's pretty excited about this one down here, and I can kind of understand why. So hopefully we'll see more of those popping up over this week, but those are the ones to keep an eye on if you want to know the really fun stuff. And of course my monster project, but we'll talk more about that next week, don't worry about that. There we go, I said the news was going to be quick. Let's move on to the main thing. Last week we mentioned fx.hash, fx.rand and fx.iteration, but this week we're going to mention the fx.features method. Now, features is the thing that sits under a single artwork and tells you about the traits of that artwork, and it's also the thing that collectors use to kind of search through and hunt through a whole collection, filter down to the ones that they're just looking for. A little history on features. I mean, kind of. If we go back a couple of years to when things were really hot, people were flipping pieces from a collection based purely on the rarity of that piece. So if there was something in there that was super rare, you could flip it for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a bit like loot crates in games or Magic the Gathering packs, where you open a pack and in there's normally common things, but now and again you'll get like a golden shiny rare, and that's what generative art was kind of back then. So people paid particular attention to trying to spot these traits and these features as early as possible. But even then, and since then quite a lot, people have been talking about, well, you shouldn't really be buying art for the traits and the rarity, you should just be buying it based on how it looks. And rarities and traits don't really matter that much at all, it's just purely how you feel about the artwork when you come to look at it. And because of that, some artists haven't included any features at all. You don't need to have the features, you can go purely on just, here's a big collection, and then you look through it and find out what emergent features there are in there, just aesthetically. I sort of fall into the middle of that, in that I don't really believe that rarity should be super important, but I do think features are kind of handy to allow people to filter down and find what they want. So I kind of include them, and that's what this is all about. So let's get on and have a look at that features object. So over here we have a features object of 4 things. We've got the time of day, we've got the season, we've got weather, and if there's a UFO in the sky or not. Now in code, that's normally like represented by time equals 0, season equals 1, weather equals 3, UFO equals true false, and obviously a whole bunch of other things as well. But they're not really great, they're not really human readable, so we want to translate those into something that makes much more sense to us. You don't need to put everything in there. Every little choice or decision that's made in the code doesn't need to turn into a readable feature, and you can also combine a whole bunch of stuff just into one feature. I'll talk about that in just a moment. To get fxhash to see those features, you need to feed that JSON object into the fxhash.features method like this over here. Now you could do it this way, but I normally build the features object first and then add the things in one at a time, and then just put that final thing into the features method right at the end. I find it easier, but you can do it either way, all in one go or bit by bit like that. Now, this is where I have an opinion with a kind of best practice for these things. Say you have this artwork here that's made up of these stripes, red stripes, green stripes and blue stripes, and they all have a rotation. Now I've seen people do this in features before now, where they just go red angle equals angle, green angle equals angle, blue angle equals, you get the idea. And that doesn't help anybody because it makes every single piece unique in sort of a rarity thing, because there's no matching features here. You can't filter by this, you can't sort by this. That's not very useful. But what you could do instead is make a decision to have a thing called style, and let's say when the things are at different angles it's called complexity, but when 2 of them are within like 30 degrees of each other and the third one is completely different, we'll call it duo. And then a third case that if all of them are within 30 degrees of each other, we'll call it like mesh or something like that. So we're taking these complicated numbers that don't really mean much, and then we're combining them and making those decisions to come up with a nice human readable name from them. I've done this before when I've had a project that's got a grid and there's a certain number of things in the grid. Instead of going grid size 5, 6, 7, 8 and things in them like 4, 5, 6, 7, I just add those numbers together, and then depending on the total, say whether it's simplicity over here or complexity over here. And because most things fall into the middle, those are your more common ones, and the things that are very minimal over here or very complex over here are like the more rare things, if we're talking about it as a features thing like that. And a good example of that is where you have to make choices. So often we'll have values that are somewhere between 0 and 1 or 0 and 100. And again, that doesn't make a good feature, but you could choose to divide into bands like this, where they're evenly spaced. So you've got a 25% chance of being in this value, 25 here, 25 here, 25 here. Or, depending on how the maths works out, you could divide the bands up like this, where the first 60% is called simplicity, and then the next 30% is called complexity, and the next 10% is called super troubled or something like that. And that's starting to introduce not only a reflection on the style, but also a rarity element into it too. So that's a kind of a fun thing you can do by choosing where to split your bands. You're introducing that extra element to it. The final thing I want to cover is where we call that method in the code, because it kind of needs to happen as soon as possible. The sooner in your code you can let fxhash know those features, the better. I'll save this for another time, the whole structure of a code type of thing, but we're thinking of this as a script that generates art, and the closer to the top you can send out those features, the better it is for fxhash. So this is an example of how not to do it. Say you have a project that is going to grow a tree, and then you're going to have oranges at the end of the branches, and that's animated. So the branch starts to grow, and when it reaches a certain length, you roll the dice, you pick a random number to find out how many branches it's going to go into, then you run the same code again on those, and they branch again, and they branch again, and branch again, and then once it reaches the very end of the branch, it then randomly decides if it's going to have an orange on the end of the branch or not. Because it's deterministic, that tree will always grow in the same way and always have the same number of oranges. But because you're deciding that in an animation loop, and you don't know you're going to end up with 8 oranges until it's finished that animation loop, you can't tell fxhash, hey, you just need to wait 30 seconds for me to finish drawing this, and then I'll tell you how many oranges you need. If you were going to have the number of oranges as a feature, you would have to have worked that out before you even start the animation, how many oranges you're actually going to end up with. That's a little bit outside the scope of this video. We will cover it at some point, but it is a tripping point for some people that things decided in an animation loop can't end up as one of your features. You need to know it pretty much right up at the top. And to recap, that's pretty much it. You feed a one-level JSON object into the fx.features function, and then you're good. Now, my personal view is that features and traits is an important part of the project. You basically have 3 places to tell the story of your project: in the artwork, in the description, and then in the features. And the features is a continuation of the description, if you like, and a place to tell the collector a little bit more about that specific piece. So I think it's definitely worth spending some time on thinking about the structure of your features or the names of your features. Again, I know there's some artists who don't use features at all, and that's absolutely fine. You can choose to do that, but at least you can make an intentional choice about whether it's going to be part of your project and part of the art, or whether you're not going to have it, or how much you actually care about it relating to the thing. And I think that's it. My cards tell me it's time for news 2. Well, that sting is just too ridiculously long. I really need to sort something out for next week. That's not right at all. Anyway, the news is not fxhash related, I guess. I've launched a project over on Alba, which is an open platform where anybody can release a project on ETH. It's where I put Falling Water, and I wanted to release another project there too. I have a hunch that a lot of artists are saving an ETH project for the launch of fxhash 2. I mean, I know I've got one, I've got Monster. So it's a bit of an unfortunate time, I think, for Alba to go, here's an open platform on ETH, when everybody's holding their projects back. I, however, tend not to hold my project back like that. I'm more than happy to put it out there. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. So if you are interested in my work and collecting on ETH and all that type of stuff, I will put links below. But we'll recap on how that did in my week notes if you want to catch up on those on Friday. And I think we're done. We're through all the cards. All right, I've got to edit this now. You have a great week, and I will catch you for the next episode. I should probably say at this point that I'm planning on doing more tutorials about writing code and structuring code and fxhash params. But once again, I'm waiting till after the launch and things have settled down, so I have proper ones of those. So it's worth sticking around for future episodes, because we're going to dig into some proper stuff. feel like these ones are just laying the groundwork for those. Anyway, I've already said goodbye, so what was that? Right, I'm going to go take some lemsip. Bye.